On the first Sunday after New Year, my son and his wife arrived with a pie and a plan. The pie was lemon and honest about it. The plan was shinier than my table and just as hard to wipe off. She slid a glossy brochure toward my cup, the way a magician lays down a final card when he's already counted your size. "It's just a bridge," she said, cheerful as a morning show, "till the bonus hits." Her hand made a light scooping motion at the air, as if the future were served best by the ladle. I touched the warm rim of my mug and watched steam make a curtain I could think behind. Outside, the street sat in its winter mood. Pale light, small noises, the neighbor's dog pretending to be brave about a trash bin. Inside, my kettle hummed like a friend who knows when to stay out of the conversation. I waited for the part where "we" would mean you. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I am a retired bookkeeper. That means two things. I can tell when a story is leaving out a column, and I have made peace with the tidy kinds of boredom that keep a roof from wondering who owns it. My house is modest and paid for with years. There is a folder of utility bills on the pantry shelf that looks like a parade of small green checks marching away from trouble. On the inside of my cupboard door, I keep a collage of casserole labels my daughter leaves on her dishes: chicken, extra time; shepherd's pie, don't share with Harold down the block; lasagna, light on cheese. Those little stickers are my calendar when my phone sulks. My son is a good man, a nervous laugh, a quick apology, hands that fix more than they break. He married a woman who could make a spreadsheet purr and a timeline sprint. Clever, stylish, allergic to waiting. She calls me Mom, which I allow because love has dialects. She calls money fluid, which is where our dialects part like polite strangers at the corner. Long ago, on a gentle winter that pretended to be spring, my husband asked what I wanted if he went first. "A porch chair that catches morning," I said, "and a bank account that behaves itself." The chair arrived blue and loyal. The bank account took practice. I keep 3 small pots that steady my days. One for living, one for the surprises nobody is surprised by, and one labeled in my handwriting, later. Later means I still have a say. The later pot sits where recipes live, because resisting an unnecessary purchase and resisting a third cookie use the same muscle. Some people keep faith on their nightstand. I keep it in a drawer with teaspoon measures and cards splashed with sauce from happier kitchens. The neighborhood is unremarkable in a way that keeps a person sane. The grocery keeps its bell by the door and rings every time someone remembers milk. The postman waves at babies and dogs, not in that order. My porch rail needs paint, but not urgently, which is how most important things introduce themselves to older people. "Here's the thing," my daughter-in-law said with the tone of a person unveiling a sculpture. "We have a window. The contractor can start now if we lock the deposit this week. It's a deal. He's basically doing us a favor. We'd pay you back as soon as the bonus lands. It's just a bridge." My son nodded like a bobblehead that had found its calling. "It would make it easier when you visit us," he added, earnest. "Lower counters, better light. We thought of you." They weren't wrong about my love of light. They weren't wrong that I like a counter that doesn't scold my wrists. But love that names you as a reason can be a charming thief. The brochure glittered with strange confidence. Cabinets that smiled with all their teeth, a backsplash reflective enough to adjust your hair. I pictured flour on those immaculate surfaces and felt an urge to sneeze. "How long is the bridge?" I asked. She named a season and, with a sentence, turned it into a weekend. That is a talent. It is not one I trust around my porch. "We wouldn't even ask," my son said, "if it didn't help you, too." He beamed like a man offering a prize that came out of your closet. I have learned not to debate a future that has set the table without asking which chairs I own. Debating makes the future louder. I poured more tea. I listened. I let love be love and let math be math. What if, I said, we talk after dessert, when the lemon stops shouting and the sugar apologizes? We ate. We praised the zest. After the plates were cleared, she placed her palm on the brochure, as if to steady both of us. "Just till the bonus," she said again. The phrase wanted to be a lullaby. It sounded like a sales pitch that had worn slippers. I nodded in a way that means, "I heard you, nothing has happened yet." Help is a lovely word until it starts moving your furniture. A few days later, she texted that she wanted to streamline my bills. "Online portals are easier," she wrote, adding a wink that made easier put its boots on my coffee table. She offered to catch senior discounts you might be missing and automate the boring parts. She came by with a laptop and a smile that wanted to be trusted. I set her at my table and made coffee strong enough to lift a small bus. She narrated the way the world had improved while I was busy admiring hydrangeas. She clicked. I nodded. My folder of utility bills sat at the edge of the table, like a witness who knows the whole trial is theater. When she reached for it, I slid it toward her and said, "You may admire it. It is married to me." She laughed. "Mom, we're just tidying." "Tidying is welcome," I said. "Relocation is not." She typed kindly for a while, changed nothing essential, and then, as if remembering why she had dressed so competently that morning, returned to the contractor. "He can pencil us in," she said. "He just needs proof a deposit will be there. We can show him something on paper." "Paper is an honest friend," I said. "It hates pretending." She drew a little heart on a sticky, wrote down a couple of passwords I do not own, and slid it toward me like a treaty. The sticky slid back, crisp as a rule. "My recipes live here," I told her, tapping my forehead. "My passwords live next door." My son arrived halfway through, kissed my cheek, and played guitar chords on his promises. Love and momentum harmonized until they sounded like the same song. I made more tea. When they left, I took down my small ledger notebook from its shelf beside the teapot and wrote a single line. "Kitchen wants a bridge." I drew a dot next to it. A dot in my ledger means the matter is mine to finish. That night, I walked my usual circle to the corner and back, greeting the dog who resents trash day and the cat who patrols as if voted sheriff. Our neighbor, Mrs. Paxton, asked if I'd seen the new cabinets at her niece's. "You can see your face in them," she said. "I already own this one," I replied, tapping my cheek. She laughed. "You and that chair," she said. "Married." The chair and I did not correct her. Days softened into each other. She started sentences with, "when the contractor," and my son started sentences with, "we'll just cover the gap," and then. The gap, unfortunately, is where later lives. She brought paint chips the way some people bring apologies. She held them up to my morning light and spoke about tone and mood, as if kitchens were teenagers. The brochure returned to my counter alone twice, the way cats return to houses they do not live in. An acquaintance at the senior center asked what color tile I was choosing for their Reno. I said the color no, and he said he hadn't seen that in the magazine spreads. "It's subtle," I said. Twice that week they swung by, with refreshments and new reasons. "It will be easier for you," she insisted. "You don't like their stove," he added. "I do not like stoves that brag. I like stoves that work and mind their business." I will admit I pictured my lasagna in a kitchen that glittered like a show dog. Then I pictured my savings in a different outfit, thinner. I am not uncharitable. I remember being 28 and convinced a better lamp could fix my life. But I also remember 65, when I learned the only difference between thrifty and cheap is whether you are lying to yourself about the interest. One morning, while watering basil that faints for sport, I noticed my casserole labels curling at the corners inside the cupboard door. I smoothed a label with my thumb. The little heart my daughter draws next to her name touched my knuckle. I felt my spine conclude a meeting with itself and return with minutes. We will be kind. We will not be foolish. Later that afternoon, a friendly young man from a staging company left his card at my door in case we listed soon, and I wondered which air carried those rumors across the street. The card's edges were embossed. Embossed edges always think highly of themselves. I set a small task with a message inside. Before we talk money, I told them, come Saturday and help carry donations to the church hall. 2 trips. Pancakes after. It was not a trap. It was a temperature check. People who want to reshape your future ought to be able to carry boxes. They both said yes at the same time, like a pair in a commercial who are paid in admiration. On Saturday morning, the boxes waited by the door. I brewed coffee, the color of conviction. A text arrived from my son at almost... There, swamped, he wrote. Rain check. A heart from her, a promise for later today. Later did not knock. I carry my age like a basket. You can set weight in it, just not too fast. I took 1 box at a time to the porch. A teenager with earbuds appeared like a pleasant miracle and lifted the last box with a grin. He wouldn't take pancakes because he was saving for a guitar. We honored each other with simple nods and went our ways. When I returned, a fresh notepad with a contractor's logo sat beside my phone, and the brochure had found its way under a magnet shaped like a strawberry, as if the refrigerator had become their bulletin board. A little sticky said, "Bridge soon, it's happening," in tidy, optimistic letters. The tidy optimism made my kettle click. That evening, I wrote another line in my ledger, bridge, still imaginary. I drew a second dot. Dots in a row are quiet bells. My sister called with a voice that has always worn a red cardigan. "I hear they're redoing the kitchen," she said, gleeful, because gossip is just news that wants to dance. "Who told you?" I asked. "Your son," she said. "Look at you, getting upgrades by proximity." "Upgrades are not contagious," I said. "Neither are boundaries." At the grocery, the clerk asked after my opinion on quartz versus butcher block, as if I had installed a showroom in the night. "Depends whether you bake bread or invite it," I said. People accepted my riddles because they thought older women earned them. I took to my porch with a book that had the right amount of patience in it and watched the day consider rain and then choose not to bother. The neighbor's dog lay on the walkway with the heroic sigh of a creature who has decided against a career in security. In the late afternoon, my son appeared alone. He carried humility like a backpack. "She just wants it to be nice," he said. "For us, for you. She doesn't mean to push." "I believe her," I said. "I do not mistake pushing for mowing." He looked at me like a boy again, that look he used to wear when he had scraped his knee and then tried to outrun the sting. "We're good people," he said. "Good people can be impatient," I said. "Impatience borrows." He nodded. He did not argue. He did not confess either. He looked around my kitchen with a fondness that surprised him, then told me he could fix the wobble in the pantry shelf if I would stop pretending I liked it that way. We replaced a tiny screw and called it a victory ceremonial, enough for tea. A day later, my daughter-in-law arrived with 2 coffees and a hopeful look. "If the deposit came from us, technically, would you? I mean, could you front it for a day so the schedule doesn't slip?" She was trying compromise on, like a dress, spinning in the mirror to see if it liked her. "It would only look like it came from you," she added, as if appearances were a harmless game. "Appearances are very athletic," I said. "They run ahead and tell stories we haven't agreed to be in." She laughed, but her eyes did not linger. She set a tile sample on my table as if it had a seat reserved. "Feel how nice," she said. "It does feel nice," I agreed, stroking the cool square. "So does saying no and sitting down." She changed the subject. We ate muffins that refused to apologize for being cake. We talked about her work, where she swims in charts and comes up with pearls. We talked about my neighbor, who had decided to grow tomatoes with more confidence than evidence. We did not mention bridges or bonuses. When she left, the tile remained on the table, patient as a reminder. It is a tricky instrument, the word no, when you love the people trying to borrow it. Played wrong, it screeches. Played right, it turns out to be a lullaby. That week, I wrote a boundary letter that fit on an index card. I wrote it 3 times until it sounded like me in daylight. "I love you. I am not lending, co-signing, or bridging. You may borrow time, rides, and a lasagna. Love is the help you can accept in daylight." I tucked the card into the drawer with my measuring spoons. The drawer our hands open without looking. Some rules belong where muscle memory lives. I also did something I recommend to any older person with a porch and relatives who say window a lot. I moved the reel later to a place where faces matter. I left a decoy in the recipe drawer, tidy enough to tempt anyone who trusted labels more than people. Then I made tea and congratulated myself on my bad handwriting, which protects and offends in equal measure. For a few days, I counted small promises. Would she arrive when she had said? Would he call before stopping by? Would they carry a box without being paid in pancakes? I do not shame myself for counting. Counting spoons is how some of us got this far. On the day her calendar was convinced the deposit should celebrate itself, my house told me someone had entered my drawers and rearranged my weather. I reached for my ledger and found it a breath off its place, which might be nothing if not for the ribbon marker, tucked between pages I had not visited and punctuated with a tiny impatient dot from a pen I do not own. In the recipe drawer, the envelope in my handwriting had shifted under the weight of other intentions. A second envelope, tidy, official in the way printable forms pretend to be, now sat beside it. Inside that second envelope, I found a little IOU printed from the internet. My son's careful signature leaned against a promise. My daughter-in-law's initials smiled next to a line that read, "Kitchen, Bridge." There was a date in the future and a note about bonus expected, as if hope were collateral. I put the papers back where they did not belong and closed the drawer the way you close a nursery door, hoping sleep decides to forgive you. The kettle clicked. My hands remembered every baby I had ever held too tightly in my fear and then loosened. The front door opened on its own momentum. They entered as if practicing for a commercial about domestic joy, apologetic about traffic, decorated with compliments for my sweater, carrying a bakery box they had paid for with either money or optimism. My daughter-in-law set down a tile sample with ceremony. "It went through," she said, bright with relief. "We're locked, thank you. You have no idea. The contractor says we're on the schedule. I'll text you the receipt." My son placed the box between us like a sacrament, then tried to meet my eyes and measured whether he stood a chance. He looked at the envelope drawer and then looked away. His voice arrived quiet and second. "We thought it would be easier this way," he said. "It went through," she repeated, as if the sentence itself could make something true twice. The room, which knows me better than most people, waited to see who I would be. The tile winked in the window light, all confident edges. I set a saucer on the shiny square to keep it humble. I invited them to sit. They sat. In the pause that followed, I heard my husband's old counsel rise from the past like a song you didn't know you knew the words to. Don't shout. Don't make a speech. Put the kettle on. Then tell the truth that can fit on a page. I did not raise my voice. I let the kettle speak first. Then I set 3 cups on the table like witnesses, and I began. I let the cups warm our hands and the steam soften all the sharp edges that pride had brought to the table. Then I told them, plainly, the thing I had been carrying like a folded letter in my pocket. I moved my laters a while back, I said. The drawer with recipes and good intentions is just where I keep temptation on a leash. What you found in there was a decoy. The real future lives where faces matter. My daughter-in-law tilted her head, the way you do when a picture finally comes into focus. So you knew, she said. I knew from the first, just till the bonus. I also knew you were not thieves. You were in love with an idea, and it had borrowed my name without asking. She tried bravery. We thought it was settled. We're sorry, but we thought... You thought momentum made permission, I said. It never has, not even when the brochure smiles. My son stared at the tile under the saucer as if quiet could make it smaller. We signed an IOU, he said. I left it like a child who took cookies. I was going to tell you and make a joke so it would land softer. Jokes are pillows, I said. They do not replace a bed. They both looked stricken and beautiful in the way people do when their goodness has run ahead of their wisdom and left it to catch up. My daughter-in-law reached for my hand, stopped halfway, then finished the reach because there is no sense turning back in a doorway. I am embarrassed, she said. Not because you caught me, because you waited, and I still did the wrong thing. Waiting is the only chance we ever give each other to arrive as ourselves, I said. I wanted to see if you would catch yourself. She didn't argue. The bravado that had carried her through paint chips and promises drained away, and in its place sat a young woman who had been told by a world that sells sparkle that good lives need upgrades to be true. We wanted a leg up, she whispered. Then stand on your own legs, I said, and smiled because the sentence sounded like a scold, until you noticed the compliment hiding in it. You have good legs, they just need practice. My phone buzzed on the counter with a careful message from the contractor, scheduling on hold until the owner's deposit cleared, happy to talk when ready. It wasn't a gavel, it was a broom. We swept the room with it. She read the words and nodded like a person discovering gravity works here too. I slid the boundary letter to the center of the table and read it aloud the way you read a recipe the first time, slowly, so the flavor sticks. I love you. I am not lending, co-signing, or bridging. You may borrow time, rides, and a lasagna. Love is the help you can accept in daylight. No one cried. The dignity of the moment didn't need tears. It needed air. We let air in. I can fix the drawer I opened, my son said. He pulled the printed IOU from his wallet, folded it in half and in half again, until it became the size of a reminder and not a plan. He set it on the tile under the saucer like a little white flag. We got ahead of ourselves, he said. We forgot the house is yours and the future has your name on it. And I forgot, I said, to say no sooner. It would have saved you some pacing. We ate the bakery cake without ceremony. It was too sweet and we deserved it. While we ate, we talked about kitchens that have done their work for generations without needing to shine. We talked about light fixtures that do not flicker and paint, that tells the truth about a room. We talked about the difference between making a home and dressing one for strangers who may never come. When they left that evening, no one slammed a door or carried a grudge down the steps. My daughter-in-law paused on the porch, touched the rail that still needs paint but not urgently, and said softly, "I will earn the kitchen I want, or I will learn to want the kitchen I have." "That is a very adult sentence," I said. "It will look good on you." I watched their tail lights turn the corner, then carried the tile to the sink and washed it like any other dish. I put it in the drawer with the extra napkins. It sat there like a retired idea, tidy and harmless. The next morning, I walked to the church hall with a batch of muffins that were honest about being cake. The coordinator saw me and grinned. "We're short on pancakes tomorrow," she said. "Can your wrists stand a spatula?" "My wrists can stand almost anything if the coffee is strong," I said. I sent a message to my son and his wife, pancake shift, church hall tomorrow morning. If you're coming, bring laughter and a willingness to lift skillets. They sent a heart, then a question. Then, to my quiet delight, a yes. Church hall mornings have their own weather. The air smells like buttered hope and old jokes. The stove sings, the floor squeaks, the coffee lies about how much it can do. They showed up early, my son in a t-shirt he should have retired, and my daughter-in-law in shoes that regretted themselves within 10 minutes. She wore her hair in a practical knot and her humility where it belonged, out in front. "Show us," she said. So I did. I showed them how batter behaves when it's ready and how a spatula becomes a kind of interpreter. I showed them how you can flip a circle of breakfast and still have room in your day to apologize when it lands badly. We cooked, we laughed, we learned the names of strangers who came back for seconds. A neighbor told us about granite countertops that never once returned a phone call. An older man admitted he'd once borrowed his mother's later and spent 3 quiet years making the world even again. He shook my son's hand and said, "Don't make my mistake. Make your own smaller ones." We cleaned until the stainless steel tables could see themselves again. In the last sweep, my daughter-in-law found a small sign tucked behind the rice cooker. It said, "Right now/not now." Someone had used masking tape and a fat marker. The words looked like they meant business. She took a photo and set it as her phone wallpaper without saying a word. On the walk back, we passed the thrift shop where the window display still believed in summer. She pointed at a chipped bowl that had more charm than polish and said, "That's our speed." We bought it for a few coins and carried it home like treasure. That afternoon, she came by with 3 blank index cards and a pen. "Teach me your ledger voice," she said. We sat at my table and made 2 lists. On one card, "Right now, fix the flicker, scrub the grout, choose paint that looks like itself in daylight, learn to love scratches as evidence of life." On the second card, "Not now, magazine sink, bonus magic, anything that requires a bridge that spells my name." On the third card, she wrote, "Maybe later," and left it mostly blank, which is how later likes to be treated. My son took the wobble out of my dining chair without being asked. He oiled the hinges of the pantry door until it stopped telling everyone how it felt. When he finished, he held up the little wrench-like proof that some victories are audible only to the person who needed them. We sealed the day with tea and a slice of humility. It tasted better than it sounds. 2 evenings later, my daughter-in-law showed up without a brochure for the first time in a season. She carried a small envelope and her face looked like weather that had finally chosen sun. "We owe you a clean drawer," she said. Inside the envelope lay the folded IOU, now crossed through and initialed with apology, and a note in her tidy hand. "Please return to sender. Momentum, addressee unknown." "I was raised on goals," she said. "I believed in timelines more than people. It made me efficient and sometimes unkind. I don't like that sentence. I'd like to write a better one. You just did, I said. We sorted the recipe drawer together. We returned measuring spoons to their little nest. We put the tile sample under the napkins where it could practice patience. We taped my boundary letter to the inside of the cupboard door, beside the casserole labels where rules and love are known to live peacefully. When she left, the kitchen sounded like a room that had signed a treaty with itself. For poetic justice, I did not buy a grand thing. I paid the carpenter who works out of a garage 3 streets over to sand and paint my porch rail in a color that looks like the inside of a seashell. He fussed, I interfered, we compromised, and the rail learned to shine without showing off. I fixed the wobbly board the chair sighs about. I rehung the little wind chime that knows my husband's story by heart. Neighbors asked who I was expecting. I said myself before the rain. My son noticed first. He ran a palm along the rail the way a person checks whether a sentence holds. You used your later on yourself, he said. I used my later on, the part of me that carries the groceries, I said. It returns the favor every day. He looked taller, which is what happens when boys become men very close to your porch. Weeks gentled into each other. They kept their right now and not now. Cards on the fridge with a magnet shaped like an orange that has seen some things. They learned that a lamp in the right corner can do more for a room than a new room would do for a life. They sanded cabinet doors on a Saturday and discovered that progress sometimes looks like dust. They cooked on their old stove and declared the lasagna delicious anyway. They saved a little each month, not enough for a magazine to applaud, but enough for a future to notice. On a breezy afternoon that pretended to be spring before it had the right, my daughter-in-law arrived with a different kind of envelope. Inside was not a request but a certificate she had made on her work printer. 1 Saturday of labor for your porch mulch, paint touch-ups, and coffee on me. In the corner, a smiley face, same as the ones on her stickies. For once, it belonged exactly where it was. Keep your bonus, I said. Bring me your Saturday. We made a date of it. On the day, she wore old clothes and no momentum. We mulched like people with honest knees. We argued about where basil goes when it misbehaves. We laughed at squirrels who have never read a single boundary letter and still managed to live with their choices. At lunch, she asked me a question I had waited a long time to hear her ask. How did you keep saying no when it would have been easier to fold? It is not easier, I said. It only feels quieter for a minute. Then the future has to shout to be heard. I learned to give the future a good chair at the table so it doesn't have to raise its voice. She wiped soil from her cheek with the back of her hand and nodded like a person who had added a new recipe to her book. Their kitchen did, eventually, change, by degrees that matched their patience. He replaced the buzzing light with something that told the truth. She swapped out angry hardware for pulls that did not judge. The grout surrendered its scandals to a toothbrush and elbow grease. A friend sold them a second-hand table that had only ever known cheerful arguments. Nothing in the room sparkled. Everything worked. They invited me to christen it between seasons with a large pot and a small ceremony. The lasagna fit in the oven like a sentence returning to its proper subject. We ate with our elbows improperly correct and made a list of everything we were grateful for that did not require a receipt. Health, humor, a neighbor's dog who finally understood fences, the napkin in their junk drawer with our rules on it, my porch rail in shell white, and the basil, which fainted for drama and recovered for sport. At the end of the night, my daughter-in-law handed me back my spare key, not to return it forever, but to ask the right question. May we put this back under your saucer, she said, for the days when love is a knock and not a plan? You may, I said. The saucer has learned its job. We tucked the key in its old place, buried enough to be honest, shallow enough to be found by memory. We watered the herbs and declared them heroic. We laughed, and it felt like something wider than a kitchen had been renovated. Life did not turn into a brochure. It turned into something better, a set of rooms that spoke in our voices. When they forgot the rules, the kettle reminded them. When I forgot patience, the wind chime tattled. We built a way of talking that did not require anyone to pretend they had never been tempted. I used a sliver of later on the church hall stove when it tried to retire mid-pancake. It felt right to give heat back to a room that had cooked some sense into us. My son and his wife started showing up on Saturdays, not for penance but for practice. She worked the spatula with a confidence you cannot buy. He learned the art of pouring batter that does not wander. People came back for seconds. That is the only review a kitchen will ever need. We kept our napkin rules: ask before you enter, speak to the person who lives in the plan. Pies are welcome only when they taste like respect. They made a small savings jar labeled "Right Now," and every time it reached a certain weight, they did something humble and permanent. New caulk, a rug that didn't argue with bare feet, a fan that moved air like a good story moves time. On a quiet morning, a season later, a text buzzed through from my daughter-in-law. It was a photo of their right now and not now cards, smudged at the corners, and a caption: "Kept the list, kept our word, kept each other." It is the best kind of brag. That afternoon, my son came by to rehang the picture of the lighthouse. My husband and I bought on the trip where the toll doubled, and our patience did too. He leveled the frame with 2 taps and a small grin. "I like this life," he said. "It goes with our faces." We drank coffee on the porch and let silence do what speeches cannot. The rail caught the light and sent it back the way people send back grace when they have learned how to hold it without dropping it. The basil fainted on cue and recovered before anyone could be concerned. New Year's week circled back as it always does, dragging its sparkles and its sails. They knocked, not with pie and a plan, but with a thermos and an invitation. Supper in a kitchen that doesn't need to impress anyone but the people eating in it. We ate something humble and wonderful, and when we were done, my daughter-in-law handed me a folded piece of paper. I recognized her neat hand. "RIG8 now. Call your mother before you call a contractor. Not now. Borrow later from anyone who didn't offer. Always. Bring pancakes." "Fridge?" she asked. "Fridge," I said. We stuck it there with the orange magnet that has seen some things. It looked like a flag for a country I would gladly live in. When I walked home, the evening gave my porch back the way a courteous driver gives back your lane. I sat in the blue chair, felt the steady gift of the rail under my palm, and told the house we had done a good job. The house believed me. The wind chime voted yes. The kettle approved in its old language. No one in the story was punished. Everyone in the story grew. That is the only justice that lasts. Mention in the comments if you liked the story.